Welcome to Regent TV. I'm Gabriel. Today, we bring you an in-depth look at Making Room, Ending Homelessness, a speaker series that explores how advocacy, policy, and lived experience intersect to create real solutions to housing insecurity. The first event in this series featured Diana Chan McNally, a frontline community worker and homelessness advocate in downtown Toronto. With over a decade of experience, Diana shared her work advancing housing rights, the policy wins she has helped secure, and how she influences municipal and provincial decision makers to bring lasting housing solutions into place. This conversation is especially important for Regent Park and surrounding downtown East neighborhoods, where rising rents, limited affordable housing, and systemic barriers continue to affect residents' safety and well-being. Diana's insights remind us that meaningful change happens when communities engage with policy, push for accountability, and collaborate to create real solutions. Up next, we'll bring you the full discussion with Diana Chan McNally, diving into her perspectives on housing, human rights, and what it takes to make room for everyone in our city.
So Dan, the first question here is, looking back across your entire time working on homelessness in Toronto, how has the issue changed over the years? Are there moments or stories that stand out as turning points for you?
It's changed a lot. And so I've been doing this work since 2014. And actually in 2016, I worked just down the street at the Meeting Place, which is a drop-in center at the corner of Bathurst and Queen. And I worked there for... That's how I know Peter, actually, because he used to come to the Meeting Place. I worked there for 3.5 years. And I remember at that time, homelessness was generally, it was quite visible, but it also generally affected particular populations. And I don't mean that in a stereotyping way, but people who have experienced poverty, who have experienced trauma. I'm also one of these people. I was homeless as a kid. It was a bit more homogeneous in terms of the experiences of people prior to them becoming homeless. And what I see now is that people I never would have expected are now coming into drop-in centers. And the most jarring situation for me was when a relatively young man who's in his early 30s came in, and he had a Rolex watch on. He comes in and he's just like, I'm just looking for some help with something. And, we think, oh, he just needs directions. This guy is just like, how do I get out of this neighborhood? This is Dead Ass in Sherbourne. So it just kind of made sense to me. And I was like, yeah, of course. Like, what do you need? How can I help you? He's like, well, I have no money and I don't know how to apply for social assistance. I was like, you mean Ontario Works? He's like, yeah, exactly. It's like, okay. Yeah, I'm happy to help you. And so, we're doing this, and he's got his Rolex watch. He's got like quite a nice shirt on. And he's telling me about what happened to him. And so he got into an altercation where he was defending himself, but ultimately was charged and jailed as a result of this altercation. And so he was a Pill State agent, the great irony, lost his license, lost his home, lost everything. And ended up sleeping in a storage shed, and all he had left was essentially the outfit, the very fine outfit that he was wearing. Really had never encountered something like that before, and I would say at this point, even though it's kind of a jarring story, it's not that anomalous. So I keep meeting people where what's clear to me is that their experiences through life, their upward mobility, things like markers like education, for example, markers like coming from a relatively well-to-do household, that was completely untethered from them becoming homeless now. Generally, you would think you go to school, you work hard, you're going to do fine in life. That has nothing to do with whether you become homeless anymore. I mean, that was always never true because injuries can happen. Lots of different things can happen. But now I find that the link is so utterly broken that you cannot predict anymore who is going to end up on the street. And I see that in real time with professionals like real estate agents now coming through my door. So I would say that is the primary difference, is that, there is a complete breaking of the social contract where now every kind of person is becoming someone who's homeless.
Yeah, we had that story that came out last year where we had a previous MVP.
Exactly.
That was found to be homeless, and they only found out after their embassy had to do some formal audit or something.
Yeah.
So anyone could face that. Is there something that changed pre-COVID, post-COVID?
I think just the level of need. I worked frontline and I coordinated a network of drop-in centers throughout COVID. So I did both at the same time. I would work 2 days a week frontline at Dundas and Sherbourne, and then I coordinated 59 drop-in centers across the city 5 days a week and usually 12 to 14 hours a day because we had no resources. We were not considered a homelessness service. There were shelters and then there was outreach. And it's like, no, there's an entire service area called drop-ins that actually serves the most homeless people in the city. That was completely left out. So we didn't have any guidance from the province about what we were supposed to do. We were not eligible for PPE. We were not eligible for vaccines. And so I spent a good chunk of my time trying to fight for these basic resources because we were the only services that were still open in the entire city. Bathrooms, public bathrooms, we operated the only 10 public bathrooms that were open in Toronto for the first 6 months of 2020. And we had nothing. No money, no PPE, nothing. We were just buying it out of pocket because we didn't know what else to do. And I found that during that period of time, because we were the only spaces that opened, a lot of people were coming through our doors. And again, not necessarily just folks that have been on the street for some time, but we started to see Uber drivers, precarious workers like that, quite a few of them, especially would come for meal programs. We started to see people from the condos coming down in, relatively nice outfits and asking if there were any meals left. So again, that change in the demographics has been very, very stark for me. And I think overall the level of need has escalated greatly over time. I used to also run a drop-in center in Parkdale and cook. I was both a coordinator and a chef, and I was the only staff. So I had to do all of that. If you're familiar with Parkdale Activity Recreation Center, there was an evening drop-in that I ran Wednesdays and Thursday nights. And I would serve maybe 100 meals, which, one guy, that's pretty substantial to be making that. But during the pandemic, when I was working at All Saints at Dundas and Sherbourne, we got up to 350 meals a day. Wow. So when I say the level of need changed, that's a hard number that you can see. That need is very, very concrete and very much there, and it's never gotten better. It actually just keeps increasing. So I think the primary difference now is that we've had this kind of astronomical shift in the need. It's exponential at this point, and it is not slowing down at all. It's getting worse.
And of course, again, everyone has questions, please ask. Something, I want to know more about your time working in the States. You had many roles in this space. What was your first role in this space, and why did you take that job? And what's been keeping you going over the last over a decade, right?
Relentless optimism. It's a personality failing, but it works in my favor. The first job that I ever took actually was a management job, which I did not expect. But I went back to college later. I wasn't a kid at that point, and I already had a master's degree, and went to college for 2 years to suddenly become a frontline worker. My Chinese mother, if you know Chinese moms, not very happy about that. You should get a PhD. No, I'm going to go to college and waste my life working frontline. That's kind of what happened. But actually, the first job I ever had was at Christie Ossington Neighborhood Center, very close to Christie Park, Christie Pez. And I ran the drop-in, but also was the resource development manager. And my ED would be like, run the drop-in, but also go outside and ask all the businesses for money. I'd be like, it's an either or proposition. I actually physically cannot do both at the same time. So they folded the position because it made no sense. And then I ended up at the meeting place where I had the silliest job title, community engagement coach. Go team, what am I coaching you on? What is that? And I was essentially managing peer programs, but also because I really like working frontline, I just worked in the drop-in because I didn't want to sit in an office. I just wanted to hang out with people. So that's kind of how I ended up really being a very frontline person. I really like drop-in work because at a certain point, you know people so well, it really is just like hanging out. It's quite pleasurable. I enjoy it. Even though people's lives are not great and they're not doing well, it's like you can tangibly do something for people in the moment, even if it's just being kind. So that's kind of how I always stayed in the front line.
I'm wondering, with people that you met the front line, my father was a taxi driver, and part of why he liked the know as a taxi driver growing up was stories of the people that you met. He felt like you learned a lot about humanity just driving a taxi. In your time as a drop-in worker, being about seeing it, is there a hopeful story, like of someone who kind of encapsulates what is wrong or what gets people into homelessness, and then what has gone people out?
Can I pick on you, Peter? Sure. Okay. I met Peter when I worked at the meeting place, and you were a lot skinnier, and you had a giant beard, and you kind of looked like, I don't know, like Saruman. Like that was kind of your style. And you're always so smart and knowledgeable and so articulate. And I was like, okay, there's something about Peter. There's a lot of, I didn't know your story actually. And I often don't even ask unless it's something that people disclose. That's their discretion. And I don't want to force people to tell their story because that can be re-traumatizing. But the more I got to know you, the more I was like, oh, this is a very highly educated person with like incredible skills. And after I left the meeting place, we stayed in contact, and I asked if you would help me just edit documents and look over like whether they made sense from like a lived experience perspective. And then you ended up, on the steering committee of TDIN? That's right. And now you are working full time with the Toronto Alliance to End Homelessness, and you're an advocate yourself. I've seen you at Queen's Park. We've spoken together. So you, to me, kind of encapsulate what's possible if people just kind of notice these things about you. And it doesn't mean that necessarily you have to be a highly educated person. Everyone's got skill sets. I remember one fellow, again, who I know from the meeting place, and we called him Rock and Roll Dave. Because Rock and Roll Dave used to tour with rock bands, and he toured with like Alice in Chains or something in the 90s. And so he always had a guitar, and he would just sing, and he's kind of amazing. But also he used to be a chef on a cruise ship. I don't know. And I'd be like, we have a community kitchen. Dave, like, you want to make some food with me for the people? And he would just be so meticulous in how he would plate everything. And there could be like a sprig of parsley, and just the joy it brought to him to be able to exercise his skills and expertise was incredible. And I think this is why I like this work. It's like you just get to know people, you get to recognize what they can bring, and you can give them opportunities to actually bring that. And in some cases, it's like Peter is just like, you're like excelling at everything. Like, you're doing great, man. For other people, it's like just, again, having an opportunity to do what you can, what you know, and what you love doing, even if it's in this very limited capacity, is really important. So I've seen so many things like this over time, seen a lot of tragedy as well. But I know that everyone can be safe and happy and healthy if we just give them those kinds of opportunities and actual housing that they can sustain. And therein lies the problem.
Housing is number one, all right? You lose your house. To get back into a house is about $1,800 to $2,000, especially if you're like, I live in a rent-controlled apartment. My unit went up like $25. But if I were to lose my apartment, come back to the market right now, it's a whole different ballgame. So what is the reality of folks? Okay, let's say someone is in the shelter or whatnot. What's the person they have to get back into housing? We have the Canada Housing Benefit, which is a stipend, or like, can you speak more about what does it take from, you not having any money to you getting an apartment right now? What does that look like?
I always have to laugh because the city of Toronto, sorry for anyone here works at City Con, is just like, we're housing first. We operate on housing first. I was like, excuse me, you have to get your taxes done. You have to have all your ID. You have to have your applications filled out properly, and you have to have someone managing all of that for you. That is not housing first. That's bureaucracy first for like a full year to get all that documentation in place for a lot of people. So it is to say, those are the things, some of the things that you actually need to have done, especially if you're applying for supportive or social housing. And there are so many different pathways to actually get into that. If we're just talking about market rent, there is very little help for you. We have the rent cafe system at the City of Toronto, which I was just making fun of this today. Years ago, not even that long ago, I could do housing work. I often did housing work. I would support people to get housed. But then that system became closed off and put into the hands of a few people, official housing workers at housing hubs, as opposed to embedded in community supports like a drop-in center. So, every day I get people being like, I need housing. I was like, I know. Yeah, absolutely. That is the number one thing that you need. I don't have the tools anymore. I don't have access to the tools the way that I used to support you to actually do that. So you have to do this whole referral process to get someone to the housing hub, and then they have to somehow build a connection with that housing worker to get XYZ done. It's very high barrier. Things like first and last month's rent, there's no assistance for that. A lot of people that can come through the Housing Stability Fund, HSF as we call it for short, but not for everybody. For refugees, there is no paying a first and last month's rent except out of pocket. And what I've done is personally gate it for people, fundraised for it, and then just been like, let's just do this because that's the last step that you need to actually get there. So a lot of the time, it comes down to people just being like, oh my God, okay, what resources do I have? I have a community of people who will donate $5-10 so that you can actually move into an apartment. That's the kind of stuff that I'm doing a lot of the time because there isn't actually a lot structurally that makes sense. You mentioned the Canada Ontario Housing Benefit, and you should know this actually came out in the paper last week. This is a rent supplement program. It's co-funded by the federal and the provincial government, and what it does is that it closes the gap between your income and market rent. I've never liked it in the sense that it is a subsidy to landlords, essentially. It's like, well, that doesn't make the housing more affordable in the grand scheme. It just makes it affordable for that person in the moment because we've paid their landlord off. Not my favorite for lots of different reasons. But I also acknowledge that it's one of the very few ways we've been able to move people from the shelter system, from encampments, and into permanent housing very quickly. And the province has cut this program by 2/3 for this year.
Wow.
So 3 years ago now, 2023, we housed about 3,300 people through this program from the shelter system. And they've cut it now down to 570 people. I laugh because, well, I cry, laugh, it could be both. We have 15,400 people who are homeless in the city, and we could house 570. What that means is that people will get stuck in the shelter system. They're not going to turn out. They will get stuck there because they have no way to move out and into permanent housing, and anyone who becomes homeless after that will not have spaces to move into. So I'm anticipating that you're going to see a steep rise in people who are unsheltered in encampments as a result of this cut.
So currently right now, for folks who are unhoused, are looking and are ready to get to the permanent housing, is the Canada Housing Benefit the only way they get in? Are there,
It's the quickest.
The quickest, okay.
Yeah, I mean, you can go on the social housing wait list, and if you enjoy waiting for 13 years, then that is the route for you. Otherwise, there is specific housing for people who live with mental health diagnoses, who've been incarcerated. That's usually about 3 years at a minimum of a wait. So the Canada Ontario Housing Benefit, because it's, again, with private market, you're very much able to expedite people into housing very, very quickly. Most other routes are going to take you at least a couple of years.
And is this a new program and facing the reality of how long the wait list is? Because back in the 90s, there wasn't really a wait list.
Well, we didn't have as much poverty, not per capita the way that we do now. I mean, well, sadly, some people got booted off the wait list because they transitioned to a new system. And I know people who were on it for 7 years who then got booted off when it transitioned and then were told to reapply, and then they just gave up. Because they're not going to wait another 13 years for something, right? So even the way the system is managed is really problematic. A lot of it is digital. Cool, I can navigate that. Guess what? Someone who's out on the street who has no phone or has very limited access to the internet, they're not going to be able to monitor things like this or necessarily keep up. A lot of the time, again, I'll get phone calls because I'm a lot of the time the emergency contact for somebody. Be like, this person has come up. It's their time to be housed. I'll be like, that guy's been dead for 4 years. Actually, like this has happened multiple times. So even just getting a hold of somebody or just doing it in a time frame where they might still be alive is really tough. I mean, think about that, 13 years on the street. A lot of people are not going to make it through, right? Like that's just the fact. Like they're just not going to make it.
For long-term to mutual aid, and I know you do a lot of work in mutual aid, but before that, are there any questions about government programs around that exist about homelessness, like the community housing benefit? Yeah. Yes.
I was just wondering about that there seems to be a lot of CEs throughout the United States. And are there east parts of people like it would you hug of the value?
Yeah.
Are there what happens this?
There is generally priority for people who are over the age of 65, but this is also the fastest growing demographic of people who are becoming homeless. So even though that priority may exist, if at the same time it's a growing group, then the priority designation kind of gets lost in the mix if you don't have enough space overall. So I'll tell you about the last guy I housed. He's 85. He was living on the TTC. And when I first met him, he was sleeping on a streetcar and had been doing that for months. And someone told him about the drop-in center I was working at. And he just comes in, doesn't talk to anybody. He learned that we had mats. It wasn't great because it's not like a proper bed, but we had somewhere where you could crash if you needed to, and we would leave you alone and just leave you with food. And he just kept coming back every day to do that until finally he just started talking to us. I call him Uncle Dan now. I love Uncle Dan. He's the funniest guy, but yeah, he's 85 years old, and there was no actual real support for him. We tried to expedite him into a senior shelter. There was nowhere for him to go. So we're just continue to come back every day. I even got so desperate that I would go to viewings of affordable apartments with him, and he had GIS, CPP, and he had about $2,500 a month, which is not terrible, but that's your entire rent right there, right? So it was still very difficult for him to find something to afford. And I'd be like, I'm his granddaughter. This is my uncle. And we would just play that game where I'm just helping him because, blah, blah, blah. And, I can be very charming. And I thought maybe it would help, but we ended up learning about some availability in a smaller supportive housing provider called EquiHopes. And we were very charming and nice to the good people at EquiHomes. We're like, he's such a nice guy. He really cannot be sleeping on the streetcar. This is really dangerous for him. And he had already been assaulted multiple times. He was not sleeping. His health was really bad as a result of this. And they're very sympathetic. And so he ended up in Parkdale, which is where I live. And now he's doing great. He's got a backyard. He invites me over for barbecues. But I guess the difference sometimes is someone like me who's trying to exploit every possible connection. But there's so many people and a lot of overwhelmed workers that it's not really reasonable to kind of have it boil down to that kind of very individualistic approach. So at a systems level, it's not great. Definitely I'm seeing a lot more seniors who don't have anywhere else to go. And this is now a federal issue, right? Because we're saying that people who are on CPP and on GIS are not able to afford even just the bare minimum of rent. You got to do something about that. And my thing is to not always just increase assistance forever and ever. It's also but also cap the rents so that people can have somewhere to go. Also build public housing so this is not an issue. And long-term care, a lot of it is privatized as well, right? And not necessarily the kind of spaces that people should be in. So it's really interesting to me because you would think this is very sympathetic kind of situation. And I keep hearing from people they must have done something wrong in their lives. It's this is a senior who've lost their spouse and now they're on a single fixed income. They didn't do anything wrong. They just got old, and that's going to happen to all of us. Why are we not actually looking at this from a policy perspective instead just being well, there must be something wrong with them? how do they not have kids who can take care of them in a retirement fund and all? So it's like lots of different reasons. I don't know what else to tell you.
We had a question. Well, what question over here? Did you have a question?
Me, yeah.
Yes. Not brother like yes.
Well, I want to say thank you for what you do. This is genuinely heartwarming here. I'm particularly interested in what you said about the rent assistance that basically supplements your income to large market rent. And you said that this wasn't, that this isn't something the landlord essentially. If you were to propose a policy, what would it be?
I think, well, I'm not entirely opposed to something like rent supplement program, but we're also in an environment with very weak rent controls. That to me is a bit of a disaster where essentially you're going to be constantly expanding supplements instead of ensuring that people are housed. It's not a very sustainable solution. You need to do both at the same time. So, in our particular policy environment, and I recently learned that Alberta does not have any rent control. What? I did not know that. And I was like, wow, crap. That's not great. In our particular environment, we have very lax rent controls where there are massive loopholes, for example. And until those loopholes are closed, we're going to see continued evictions and rents continuing to rise very, very quickly. And we continue to see this. Even though there's been a slight drop, it's still not enough to become affordable for most people. So I would advocate for a policy environment that has a full suite of rent controls. And in the interim, we continue with these rent supplements, but make sure that we're not just constantly increasing them to the benefit of landlords, because that, again, is just feeding into a situation of exploitation and greed, which I'm not okay with. That's kind of the whole problem anyway. And then, of course, we just need to expand public housing as far as housing.
We'll take one more question and we'll come back to audience questions as well. Brother in the back.
So, it's a true part that I'm going to share. In the States, there was one builder that did it very successfully. He built community around off-site construction and had all the community people that are looking for out become a part of that community and start building your homes, and then they get an opportunity and a share in that line to expedite it. So my question here is, since we already have our community here, rather than taking an approach of maybe getting $2 here and there, collaboratively coming together of looking at fundraising, land from the government, and off-site construction coming together. Is there an opportunity? Is there some sort of organization here that's already there? And not doing like a huge one, do a crawl, walk, and run. You could start with a couple of homes with this business the entire community structure. And then you can showcase it to other people who would like to donate land, invest, whatever, but who are crawl, walk, and run type.
I feel like that could be somewhat of a land trust model based on what you're saying. And in fact, we have a number of land trusts in the city. So the original would have been the Parkdale Neighborhood Land Trust. Now it's just called the Neighborhood Land Trust. And it's not necessarily constructing, but it is acquiring properties, and some of them currently contain buildings, and the land trust model doesn't necessarily necessitate that you're acquiring a building, but it could be a property more generally that could be developed. So I would say like that is a space where feasibly what you're talking about could actually occur. There's Kensington Market Land Trust, Chinatown Land Trust. I'm sure there's other land trusts. So that the Tobago has a land trust. That's right. There's like Toga's in front here, so yeah, I remember that. Togo up front. Is that Kromatoga? So yeah. I would say look at the land trust and see also what's possible within that model.
And so I want to turn into that. You come along, you will navigate the system, but go for a little bit of a part changing the system, and tackling it head on. And there's a community of folks that come together and change it. First, I want to talk about mutual aid. What is mutual aid, and how does it all work, and the successes that you had there? Speak up mutual aid.
Sure. I mean, in the context I'm working in, mutual aid is generally like encampment outreach that's being done by community members, generally folks who are housed or do have some lived experience who are doing this to make sure that folks living in encampments are okay. And we started seeing this. Like I was working again, like the whole time during the pandemic. I think I had a really different pandemic experience than everyone else. I want the I don't know, drinking and playing Animal Crossing experience that some people have. That sounds great. I would love to do that. I never got to do that. Sad. No, it's fine. But a lot of people didn't have work. That's what happened, especially a lot of folks I know in the arts. And my background actually is in art. I have a master's degree in art history. I don't know why, it just did. Completely pointless. I don't do anything with it. But I could tell you a little bit about, whatever. You don't need to know about that. No one needs to know about that. What we saw is that, there were encampments cropping up in public parks, which are now very familiar to us. And there always have been encampments in the city. There's been encampments in the city for over 100 years. If you know where the Eaton Center is, that is the site of the city's original encampment. It was called the Ward. That's what the neighborhood was called. And it had no real built structures except what people built themselves. What is that? That's an encampment, essentially. So it was tenement housing built by the people who were living there, who were very, very poor, impoverished, generally in not working at all or in kind of semi-slavery situations. Essentially like working for a roof over their head is a situation a lot of people were in. So encampments are very old, but encampments as we know them now are generally like a camping tent in a park. That's where people think about when they think about an encampment. And we started seeing this in downtown parks at the beginning of the pandemic, and I think it was just really shocking to people because the way I think about it is, what is an encampment except the downloading of responsibility for housing directly onto the person who's homeless? That's what an encampment is. Like, if you want to think about it in policy terms, I think for me, that's what resonates. And I think that's also what other people saw. It's like, holy shit, like we just left people to completely fend for themselves. And we had folks who were often close to poverty, often precariously housed, being like, this is wrong. And so they were donating their time and resources to ensure that people were okay, bringing people food, checking in on them, learning about harm reduction and supporting people. But also, I'll be honest, like lovely, well-meaning people, some of them were not prepared for what they were going to see. And so, I remember some folks pulled a dead body out of one of the tents, and it just ruined them. Honestly, it was a terrible experience, but I was talking about mutual aid, and then I got really duh. It's a caveat of mutual aid, is that it can actually be quite distressing as well sometimes, especially if you're ill-prepared, which, I've done this work for a long time, done a lot of overdose response, and a lot of people passed away, including, in spaces I worked in. But mutual aid at its core is about we take care of each other. That's what that is. And whatever resources we have, and it's generally people without a lot of resources, we're recommitting them back into the community. And, if you're here during the pandemic, you might have been part of a mutual aid group in your neighborhood, making sure that other folks in your vicinity were okay, knocking on doors. If there's a senior who needs special groceries, you might have been helping to actually bring them something. So I think it's a concept that has gained a lot of traction since the pandemic, and I think it's great, actually, because we can't rely on government to solve all of our problems. We just can't. It's not going to happen. And so, it's a community taking control of itself, essentially, and checking in on each other. And I think, it's a pretty beautiful thing.
It truly is. Like I see GoBud needs for simple things like this person needs groceries for the week, like ukutachin and whatnot. And yeah, it's a response to, people fall from the system and community coming to pick up instead of doing that, so we have the government to do it. This mutual aid works in activism as well. I think activism is part of that. And the way I was introduced to your work was back in 2023, there was a big issue around warming centers. Tonight's a very cold night and whatnot. And as a result of your advocacy and Protest Toronto and a lot of other organizations' advocacy, the city did get a lot of more warming centers open. This was prior to Mayor Olivia Chow's time. This was John Tory's time. I wasn't at this bike. You were like the one. How did we get this packed? What was the issue? Why did you guys organizing on this, and how did you guys get it done?
Yeah, Tory was not easy. But I had a couple wins with Tory. The warming centers, and again, I worked with Progress Toronto with a lot of other groups. We won that, and I think that's because we made it such an issue with the public that they were getting just inundated with phone calls, petitions, where they didn't expect that there would be that kind of public uproar about something like people freezing to death. Why wouldn't you expect that? But they saw it, like the public showed up and they participated in these campaigns and they wrote letters and they phoned. And that pushed the mayor at the time to dedicate, he had this really limited budget because this is kind of the beginning of strong mayor powers as well. So, he was dictating most of the budget and he'd be like, we have $800,000 to allocate. And basically with Hunger Games, among the councillors being like, how can we allocate $800,000, which is nothing, by the way. So it was one of the places that there was an allocation, was into the warming centers. Prior to that, this is when I was working at, not the meeting place, where was I working at the time? I would have been at the Toronto Drop-In Network, and I've been working with folks on the street again for a long time, and, listen, I'm on my period, whatever, I'm just saying it, and guess what? People get on their period, and I didn't need to tell you that I was on it, but I did anyway, because it's natural, and we should just talk about it like it's natural. And I would just have people in the women's bathroom just wadding up toilet paper because they couldn't actually afford to buy menstrual products. And I was like, this is just undignified. It's embarrassing for people. They feel gross. They don't feel healthy and safe. So I lobbied the mayor to make menstrual products free for people on the street. And I put together a budget. I asked every drop-in center across the city, like, what would you need to supply your folks with enough menstrual products? And I was like, also incontinence products, because a lot of older adults, especially on the street, you suffer incontinence, especially a lot earlier in life. Generally, if you're over 50, if you've been on the street for a long time, you're going to have problems with incontinence. It's usually about 70 plus for like normal people. It might become an issue, but it's 50 for folks on the street. So I was like, this is just a dignity issue. And I made it an easy win for him. He could look like a progressive guy and be like, we're taking care of this stuff. And he sometimes liked those kinds of wins. And so he fully funded it, and it's continued to be fully funded since that time. That would have been 2022. So no more wadding up the toilet paper. We're going to get you some pads and tampons.
You see that thing, how do you?
Sorry for talking about my career.
We're all here because of it.
You see that thing really interesting. You said, I made it a really easy thing for him. A lot of the folks in the crowd here today are advocates and activists, and I know folks in South Etobicoke are doing great work in getting shelters past their communities. And they keep all your work. Is there a science behind this? Like, so it's like, is there like, you have an issue that you want to bring up to your politician. It's going to be a great thing to make the community more safer and a better place for everybody. What do you do? Like, for example, this getting menstrual products and custom products, or getting winter things over. What was the plan that got you to the path? So,
I think when I'm doing this work, I'm often thinking about who's the target, whose mind do I need to change. And it's interesting because I actually had a stint working at the Ontario legislature, and I worked for an MPP who no longer is in office, Batula Carpoche, and I hated that job, like just so deeply. I hated working at the Ontario legislature. But I wanted to learn, like at a bare minimum. I was like, well, maybe I'll like it. I don't know. I'm going to test this out. But I wanted to learn at a bare minimum, behind the scenes, how does this all work? And what I learned from my time there is that leverage is everything. You can build leverage, and that can be to sway someone because it's deeply unpopular, or you can make it deeply unpopular or painful for them, or you can sway them because it can be a win in their favor. And so I'm always thinking about how to build that leverage and who is the right voice to bring to the table that will be most convincing. I realize a lot of time it's not me, because everyone will be like, oh, she's basically a blue-haired activist, blah, blah, blah. Sure. I mean, I think I'm a lot more congenial than someone who's just yelling at people all the time. I'll work with anyone who wants to work with me, and I've always been very clear about that. Your political ideology, we may not agree on things, but we can find ways to work together is generally how I feel. But, More Neighbors is a great voice. You can fill in a niche that I can't. And why I love partnering with you is that you can bring a more credible voice, like to be perfectly honest, with certain people than I can. And I know that. And so, the voice and who's speaking, the message, is really, really important as well in creating that kind of leverage. So when we're talking about like opposition to shelters, NIMBYism, you're so important as a counteract to that kind of narrative and that messaging, right? Whereas people are going to expect that I'm going to say something and then they're just going to immediately not listen. And that's okay. Like, I don't need them to think I'm important and cool, but I want them to listen to somebody who has great ideas. And so, I think about that as well. Who's going to deliver the message? And how can we make this saleable or deeply, deeply painful to a politician? And so I campaigned against, I actually had 3 separate campaigns against Premier Doug Ford. It was 9 months. Unpaid. It's just something I do off the side of my desk for fun. Why? What? Yes, yeah, I'm a masochist. So Bill 6, if you're familiar with Bill 6, it's legislation that was passed last spring or late spring, which basically says that if you live in an encampment, we can fine you up to $10,000, put you in jail for 6 months, or both. If you're out on the street, you don't have $10,000. Like, let's be real. And the jails are full, and incarceration is not a solution to the homelessness crisis. Like, that is just nuts to me on every possible level. So I was like, God damn it, I have to campaign against this man for the next however long it takes. And it was 9 months, and he trotted out these 15 mayors from across Ontario. It's like Patrick Brown and Brampton, these kinds of mayors. And they're just like, we need the those kinds. Not our kinds, those kinds of mayors. And so he trotted these people, and they all said, we need the notwithstanding clause to evict encampments because we're tired of homeless people exercising their rights by being in her face, essentially. And I was like, wow, you have 15 mayors? There's 444 municipalities in Ontario. Wow. All right, this is a numbers game, because he kept saying it was 15 mayors. I was like, all right, how many city councilors, how many regional councilors can I get to be like, no? And it was 94. So I just contacted everyone I could in as many municipalities as I could, and I got at least 94 people to publicly and officially sign on and support no to doing this. We need to support people by building housing and having actual emergency supports that make sense for them. And he got really mad. It was really funny, and it was very funny to me. And I ended up organizing in different municipalities with certain councillors, and we started passing motions in Guelph, in Brant County, Ottawa, St. Catharines. I can't remember the other one. That's so bad of me. Aurelia. It's Aurelia. And we passed these motions saying that the municipality and the region will commit to not evicting encampments. And I really pissed him off. And so he had a second press conference when he announced Bill 6. So he was only threatening it for a while. He announced Bill 6. He has other press conference, and and he brought all the mayors back out. Except one of them wasn't a mayor at all. Just a random ass counselor from Aurelia. Wendy something, I don't remember her last name. She's not a mayor, and he pretends that she's a mayor, and it was a direct middle finger to me, essentially, winning Aurelia, and she was the only counselor who was like, we must evict encampments. She was the only one. So you can also just do really funny things. It wasn't a win exactly, but there's a kind of cathartic satisfaction in knowing that you really fucked with someone. Sorry, Richard Kirk.
Okay, yeah, I'd love to get to the sub-question that I think, especially about activism and how the ethics change. Yes.
Yeah, so you identified earlier a bunch of problems with provincial policy. And I was thinking about Bill 60, which was really bad for tenants. But I had one bit of hope, which is that their trial balloon about ending rent control or effective rent control was defeated in 2 days. They had to walk it back. How do we get them to walk back? Either how we apply the same kind of pressure to get them to walk back other horrible ideas left out.
It was incredible to me that they walked back that aspect of Bill 60 so quickly. And it wasn't directly saying we will end rent control, but effectively that's what it would have done. I have a feeling that there were actually allied mayors who were like, no, we can't deal with that. I think there might have been some behind the scenes advocacy from actual conservatives who were like, no, do not force that onto the municipalities at this time. But at the same time, Acorn, Ontario, they had a petition going and 25,000 people signed it in 2 days. Like, it was unique people. It was quite significant. So that kind of mobilizing so quickly, I think, sent a very clear message to this government that hands off. What I find, and this is also the strategy of this government, is that they have these omnibus bills where there's like 5,000 things in it. Bill 60 was one of them. There's like 5,000 things in there. You're just like, wait, so also about the bike lanes, that's in here too? We can't just approve these? There's so much going on that they distract you with all of these different unrelated pieces of legislation that it's hard to concentrate on because it's in an omnibus bill. That's a strategy to divide and distract. And that's what's happening. We need to come together more as siloed movements. And it's so funny because as someone who's working in the homelessness space, there's not been traditionally a lot of overlap with tenant advocacy. And you're like, wait, what? Because this guy is what happens after the tenant gets evicted. Like, this is who I'm working with. And then, there's the other side of this. And so I was like, I'm forcing myself into this situation. Was like, no, I'm insinuating some more. Because we need to have both sides of this conversation, because we need to build strategic movements of not just single issue stuff, essentially. And what is great is that I'm actually seeing a lot more coalescing around issues. Like, I've talked to Cycle Toronto, like some of the climate folks, like a bunch about stuff, and just thinking about how we are all kind of in the same boat and how we can collectively, again, build that momentum, not just around particular pieces of legislation or pieces of legislation, things built into these omnibus bills, but just more generally against this government and the kinds of actions that they actually take. There's a lot of South Asian men specifically who are outside the legislature for like 2 weeks around an immigration program, and they're all skilled workers who were brought here as skilled workers. And then the government was like, we're going to cancel all your applications to actually become a citizen here. Brutal, brutal, brutal. These are folks who have built lives here. They've been here for years, have not been eligible for citizenship yet, but that's why they're here. They're building towards something. And suddenly they've been dropped. And there's these guys who had just been outside for 2 weeks, and some of them ended up in the hospital. So they got hypothermia, and I was like, oh my God, do you need me to like organize coats? I don't know, like I'll get you hand warmers or whatever you need. But just like, I went back to talk to them like 3 times because our issues are the same issues. Utter abandonment, just cutting off of your livelihood, just suddenly being untethered about your status. You're like, this is what impacts homeless people all the time. I was like, let's talk more. And let's do this across cultures, across communities, because that's what we need to do. And we are doing it, actually, so it's a good thing.
We have a question here.
Sorry, just going back to the candidates, what you were saying. What has happened to the unhoused population with the encampments being removed and relocated and things like that? What does that do to the unhoused population? I know kind of just through qualitative observation and experience with it, but I'm curious from your perspective.
Yeah.
What has happened to our unhoused people?
Yeah, I mean, if you were around in 2021, then you're going to remember very large police-led encampment evictions, and I was at all of those when they happened, and there's a lot of pepper spray, a lot of trample. It wasn't great. I definitely messed up my arm. A cop pushed me over my pretty messed up arm for a year or so. What happened after that is not discussed very much. But because we were making a really concerted effort to try and follow up and follow where people went, nobody got housed, not a single person. 3 people died.
Yeah.
And that doesn't get discussed. Within 5 days of their being evicted, they died. So that's a real risk when we evict encampments. I don't think people realize it's not just like, oh, well, pack up your belongings and move along. It's stress, and stress leads to oftentimes like increased drug use, riskier behaviors, and we've seen people die or been like severely assaulted or end up in the hospital as a result, right? Like that's a real consequence that we don't talk about and should talk about because it's not neutral. It's something that's completely avoidable. And why would you put somebody at risk of that, really? So what I'm trying to find out now, because I am on the Housing Rights Advisory Committee, the city lately has been saying, we've resolved, that's the word they're using, we've resolved X number of encampments. I was like, what does that mean? It's not about the visibility of the encampment, it's about the welfare of the person. Don't mix those two up. So don't say, I resolved X number of encampments. Tell me what happened to those people. Where are they? Are they okay? How many of them are healthy and safe now? How many of them ended up back outside? How many of them are dead? Those are questions I need to know the answers to in order to evaluate whether we're doing well on our encampment approach. So February 20th, if you want to know, that's when those answers, I hope, I will get from the city. So I've asked in an official capacity, and I should hopefully hear some real results, I hope.
What's February 20th?
Sorry. The Housing Rights Advisory Committee meets. And that's, again, the committee that I'm on, so I'm asking these annoying questions that Evelyn hates me for.
You go, girl.
Yeah.
Okay.
They don't want to
I think that's what you're supposed to do when you're on a committee, guys.
Yes.
What gives you hope? This is an issue, as you pointed out, the campus may be going down, but homelessness is going up.
Yeah.
What gives you hope over the next couple of years? And maybe stepping back, if you were, this is one of my last question, if you were the premier, you had a town legislator, what are you going to do to make sure that this ends in the next 10 years?
Oh, man. I just want to say, I grew up in Etobicoke North, so the Ford second part of my life says time immemorial. Like, it's been an entire lifetime for me and these guys. Rob Ford used to smoke crack at my granddad's apartment building, so I remember him just being like, what? Oh, okay. He wasn't the mayor at the time. He was still a councillor, but we all knew about this stuff, right? Anyway, that's an aside. What gives me hope? Things like this. Like, there's a lot of people here. Some of you know me, some of you don't. You come from all different spaces. Some are in urbanism, some in architecture, some are just neighborhood people. We're like, this is an issue that concerns me. And that is hopeful. Like I said, it's like we are starting to coalesce more as movements as opposed to these kind of siloed, issue-based kind of community groups, but rather as a movement of people who are like, we've had enough because all of these issues intersect. What happens to bike lanes, it's similar to what's happening in supervised consumption sites. If you're taking away life-saving infrastructure, that's the same problem. It just happens to be a different piece of infrastructure. That gives me a lot of hope because I feel like until recently, there's been a lot of reticence to have these conversations or just a lot of like tribalism, so to speak. Oh, you're not 100% on side with this. Well, we can't have a conversation. I don't ascribe to that kind of thinking. I'm a community worker. It's like the whole onus of community work is to work with everyone that you possibly can. It is not about people you prefer, but rather about the broader community. And so I think I see that ethos coming out more, which is fantastic. This might be funny for some of you who know me and what's going on. I don't think electoral politics is going to solve anything. Yeah, just waiting until later in the year. Dan knows, and Dan's laughing. Elected representatives have a role, but they are not our saviors. policy is also not going to solve all of our problems. It's not. It's community. And it's also, there's a social contract among ourselves of what we are willing to stand for or live with, right? And if we're willing to not live with people out on the street anymore, we can make that happen, but only collectively if we work toward that, right? So, yeah.
I thank you so much, Diana. It's been a real pleasure. Actually, we'll take maybe 2 more questions from the audience.
Yeah. All right. So I'm not fishing for a compliment on like photography, but this is a room full of people with like pretty, I would say, diverse skill sets. There's a lot of books in text. There's a lot of books in art. What are ways that people can contribute that aren't the community worker related, because not a skill set, and how can they do, like, obviously they can do inspire more neighbors, but what else is out there?
I mean, actually, in my opinion, community work is whatever you want to bring to it. So I mentioned my arcane art history master's degree. Weirdly, the only time I've used it is in the context of community work. I mounted an exhibition across Parkdale where, I curated stories told by people living in poverty in the neighborhood and artworks, and we took over what used to be the old LCBO at Brock Street and just covered it in artwork. There was one time I used that degree literally to do activism. And whatever skills that you have are needed, especially if they're in things like tech and in communications, really. Because that's where I think a lot of groups are lacking. We're concerned, but we don't necessarily we haven't organized our skill sets and strategized around how to best to use them. So whatever you can offer actually is useful. It's just finding a way to use it in the context of a particular movement or group. But like you do it all the time with your photography, and you certainly are hilarious on social media, and we all know, and you use your communication skills in my opinion, in a community work context. So I think you already know the answer to this question, Dan. I forget what the other question was.
And just to hop on, Born in Toronto, we're a totally volunteer-run organization. We have a Discord chat. We'll send a link to sign up through the Lumo link. And you can come join and volunteer. We have volunteers all across the city, and we go. A big part of our organization is showing up to development meetings, whether it's our shelters or under new affordable housing development or boats or whatnot, to get it passed. So you need people from all the city to come join. Also, events like these are all volunteer run. We had Malcolm and Robert provide the food here today. If you're looking to help get these events going and whatnot, more than happy to get you in. Just talk to me afterwards. Lastly, there's actually some. I want to ask you this. On the More Neighbors side, the one thing that we are following pretty closely is a specific city policy that's going to be changing. Called MTSAs. What that basically is trying to get more housing built in our senior transit stations. I was talking to an affordable housing developer, and one thing that they really were really upset with in the city was that they're building affordable housing near a subway station, and they can only get up to a certain height, and they want to be able to build more, but the city's being silly because they're saying you can't because of what the color of the map is. The zoning is on the side, so you can't build it. But we need affordable housing. That's what we're saying. This is only consultation to get that passed. It's happening. One's happening today, but it's also happening. Everyone will send you more, and we would love for you to come up. Diana, is there some specific city? I think I know the budget's coming. There's something specific you're hoping that folks are will be asking for?
It was funny because I call him Brian from Etobicoke, but he has a last name. It's McClay. I was talking to him. Sorry to use that, Brian from Etobicoke. It's just Etobicoke. I'm like, other people from Etobicoke, we're not all Doug Ford losers. Why we? I'm actually sitting out of the budget this year, and it's actually the first year that I've done that. There are things that I would like to see, but I have a strong feeling personally that I wouldn't win them, even if I tried. And I've usually used something very small and concrete based on a real situation. So last year, we got about $800,000 for harm reduction workers and drop-in centers because supervised consumption sites were closing. People go to drop-in centers to use drugs. I know because I worked before we had supervised consumption sites, and like a lot of my job was overdose response. So I was like, you have to do this because this is what's going to happen and people will die. And so they're like, oh, okay, yeah. And so they dedicated that money. But this year I was like, the things that I would be asking for are like millions of dollars. I struggled to find a small program where I thought the investments would be really meaningful at this juncture. So I'm a big fan of MIRA. I would always like to see more money put into MIRA. MIRA is a multi-unit residential acquisition program. So they put $100 million in 2025. This year, I think it's like $46.8 million, which is half, but still a lot more than they put in the past. And I would like to see that $100 million again, but I'm not going to win another $50 million. Like, I know that. They're not going to match that contribution. So stuff like that I'd like to see, but I also was like, I'm going to let this one slide this year because on the housing and homelessness front, I actually just also have this kind of like, I don't know, deep belief that it can't be an infinitely expanding homelessness budget if you aren't going to change the policy levers that create homelessness. It's not possible. You'll never keep up with the need. That's just a fact. And I'm just at this point really focused on the province. Whereas I think most people continue to be focused municipally. I'm like, yeah, but I can go to like Great Highlands, which is rural, and I see encampments. I can go Thunder Bay, there's encampments there, Kenora. Like, it's the entire province. It's not just a city issue. And until that's resolved provincially, then municipally, I don't have a ton of suggestions, really, that require like a specific kind of allocation. So I don't know what you guys are asking for. I'm curious.
For harm reduction, this AUM yet Narcan from a bar received. There's a list on the Ontario website, and it is free. So, receipt for your yes.
Yeah, and if you find a needle on the street, guess what? It's fine. You can touch it. I do it all the time. Like, it's usually capped, and that means it hasn't been used. What I do, if you ever find one, is I find a glass bottle and I put it in, and you can drop it off at a pharmacy. Maybe that's just like everyone's like, what are you talking about? But like, there's a lot of discourse around needles being dangerous. Broken glass is more dangerous. You're not going to get, unless you're like deliberately sticking yourself with it, then you can handle it quite safely and make sure that no one else has to deal with that, right? So if you ever want to do a workshop on how to pick up a needle, I'm happy to deliver it, but I think people are like, no, Diana, we don't want to do that.
Thank you again so much.
Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Also follow us on social media, and for more information, check out our website.